Have you ever noticed that the absolute deepest wounds usually don't come from our enemies? They come from the people we trust the most, the ones we've got the highest expectations for. It's a completely universal pain, and it happens because, well, we fundamentally misunderstand how people actually operate. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the complex and, yes, sometimes really uncomfortable realities of human behavior. We're going to hold a mirror up to ourselves and pull the masks off the people around us. Let's decode the laws of human nature. So we all really like to think of ourselves as highly rational, logical beings, right? But if that's actually true, why do brilliant, incredibly intelligent people repeat the exact same mistakes over and over? Think about a time when you, or maybe someone you know, ignored literally every red flag and stayed in a toxic relationship, or fell into the same manipulative trap again and again. Why does that happen? Well, the uncomfortable truth we're exploring today is that our brains deceive us. Our emotions make us totally blind, and our egos prevent us from seeing the undeniable reality that's standing right in front of us.
Notice the massive contrast here. From a super young age, we're conditioned to just listen to what people say. But honestly, talk is cheap. Words are often just tools people use to protect their image, shift the blame, or just sound agreeable in the heat of the moment. Contrast that with actions. Actions always reveal the truth. If you want to stop getting manipulated, you have got to stop listening to the script people read from and start observing their actual, undeniable patterns of behavior. Seriously, it changes everything.
All right, Section 1, Hidden Manipulation, the masks people wear. Let's completely redefine narcissism for a second. When we hear that word, we almost always picture loud, arrogant show-offs. But it's not always like that. Covert narcissists don't always act grand. Sometimes they demand to be the absolute center of attention by constantly playing the victim. I found this absolutely fascinating because it totally shifts how we spot manipulation. A covert narcissist will literally use your own empathy and your own guilt against you, just to keep the spotlight entirely on their feelings and their endless stream of problems. To pull off these manipulations, people adopt specific roles to carry the heavy burden of their own insecurities. Just look at these. You've got the constant victim, where absolutely nothing is ever their fault. Or the moral high ground, where they are always perfectly righteous and you're always the one falling short. You see, these aren't true personalities. These are psychological masks they wear to manage your impression of them and hide their deep-seated fears. So how do you spot the real person behind the mask? You observe them under pressure. Real character only ever shows its face when someone loses control.
And then there's envy. Envy rarely shouts. Actually, it whispers. It looks like sarcasm completely disguised as a friendly joke. It's that suddenly cold, weird reaction you get when you share good news, or when someone minimizes your years of hard work by just calling it pure luck. It's passive aggression. It's an aggression that smiles right at you while quietly snipping away, undermining your progress behind the scenes.
So why do we fall for this over and over? Well, it's because we essentially have two brains operating at the exact same time. Think of your ancient brain like a rocket. It is incredibly fast, driven by fear, the immediate need for validation, and protecting your ego at all costs. Meanwhile, the rational brain is like a turtle. It's slow. It usually arrives on the scene way, way too late, long after the emotional damage is already done. And its only job at that point, to invent a logical excuse for why we just reacted so poorly. Our fast, emotional brain literally hijacks our logic to protect our ego from painful truths. Moving right along to Section 2, Compulsive Patterns, Breaking the Cycle. Okay, time for a really harsh truth we just have to accept. Ego is not an insult or a disease. It is the human default setting. Think of it like this heavy, rigid shield you're constantly carrying around everywhere. Our ego's main job is just to protect us from feeling small, wrong, or rejected. So what does it do? It twists reality. It makes endless excuses. It will always, always prefer a comfortable, familiar lie over a harsh, insecure truth. To truly understand human nature, we first have to recognize that our very own ego is usually our biggest obstacle to growth. If you find yourself repeatedly stuck in the exact same toxic situations, it's not just bad luck. A behavior that kept you safe when you were small and vulnerable is often the exact same cage that's holding you hostage today. Compulsive behavior is just an unconscious repetition of old survival tactics. Like, for example, staying totally silent to avoid conflict might have kept the peace in your childhood home, but as an adult, it's silently destroying your relationships.
Let's break down the actual mechanics of self-sabotage, because it's wild when you see it laid out. Step 1. You get super close to a real loving connection or a massive career win. But then, boom. Step 2. Your unconscious fear of change and vulnerability is suddenly triggered. You aren't necessarily afraid of failing. You're terrified of the new expectations. So, in step 3, you start overthinking everything, you demand impossible perfection, or you just pick a fight out of nowhere. And finally, step 4, the opportunity breaks and you retreat right back to the safety of what you know. We ruin our own progress because familiar chaos just feels safer than unknown peace.
And we can't ignore the massive danger in trying to be perfectly good all the time. Society constantly tells us to never be angry, to never be jealous. So what do? We repress it. But when we push dark emotions down, they become a literal pressure cooker. They don't just magically disappear, they grow. And eventually, that repression erupts like a volcano in totally unpredictable ways. Or we start projecting those emotions onto other people, constantly accusing them of the exact toxic traits we're desperately hiding within ourselves.
All right, section 3, the aimless crowd, finding your purpose.
So as we actually achieve success, a brand new danger emerges: grandiosity. It turns out as people gain success or money or power, they start to honestly believe they are an absolute exception to the rules. You start building this giant brick wall between yourself and any critical feedback, losing your empathy radar because you view everyone else merely as an audience to your greatness. But here's the thing: reality always catches up. And when you're completely disconnected from reality, your eventual fall is going to be massive. Now, if grandiosity isn't your trap, the hamster wheel probably is. We join the aimless crowd, completely mistaking constant business for an actual life purpose. We just blindly follow the script society hands us, trading our authentic, genuine selves for fleeting social approval and, digital likes. We become fickle. We change our core opinions based on whatever is convenient today. And it's all driven by this deep, ancient fear of being isolated from the herd.
We are incredibly short-sighted creatures, aren't we? We constantly pick the comfortable couch of short-term relief, like avoiding a really difficult conversation or staying in a comfortable but totally dead-end job. But finding true long-term peace means choosing the steep, rocky path of temporary discomfort. It requires setting firm boundaries and consistently choosing hard growth over easy safety. Because continuously choosing instant comfort, that is the absolute fastest route to a life filled with regret. And that brings us to section 4, the ultimate truth. Accepting mortality. The ultimate delusion we all face is death denial. It's heavy, I know, but stick with me. We act like we have unlimited sand in the hourglass. Because we desperately want to avoid the reality of our own mortality, we act like we literally have forever. And this delusion is exactly why we postpone our biggest dreams. It's why we tolerate manipulative people for years, and why we live inauthentic lives. We just tell ourselves, oh, I'll deal with it later, I'll take that risk next year. But later is a dangerous illusion that ends up costing us our most vibrant years. Embracing our mortality isn't depressing at all, it's actually deeply liberating. When you realize your time is strictly finite, you instantly stop holding on to petty grudges. You stop suppressing your true emotions just to please other people. You finally start prioritizing choices that are actually meaningful to you. And honestly, the best part, you become completely impossible to manipulate because you just no longer care about the petty games of the ego. It brings this profound, unshakable emotional intelligence. So I want to leave you with one final, pretty provocative question. If this year was your absolute last, what would you let go of? Would you let go of that toxic relationship, that fear of failure, or maybe that desperate need to be liked by people who don't even know the real you? Understanding the laws of human nature isn't about becoming cynical or cold. It's about waking up. It's about seeing the masks, breaking those unconscious patterns, and feeling an absolute urgency to live authentically, starting today. Think about it. The clock is ticking, and the choice is entirely yours. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.